I've driven that road maybe 1,000 times in my life, and I could tell you every turn of it with my eyes shut, which is part of why I know something was wrong that night. Because the road did things it has never done in 40 years of doing nothing. It was the night of my brother's funeral. Daniel. He was 8 years older than me, which when you're kids is the whole world, and when you're adults turns out to be almost nothing, except by the time I understood that it was already too late to do anything with it. We hadn't spoken much the last few years, not a fight. I want to be clear, it wasn't a fight. People always assume there was a fight. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of distance that happens when two people each keep thinking the other one will call, and then a decade goes by, and then one of you is in a box at the front of a room you grew up going to church in, and the other one is standing at the back not knowing whether he's allowed to cry. I left the wake late. Too late. I should have stayed at our cousin's like everyone said, but I wanted my own bed. Or I told myself I did. The truth is, I wanted to be alone, where nobody could watch me feel it. The only way home is the forest road. You know the kind. No streetlights, no houses, no turn-offs for the better part of 40 minutes. Just trees that come right up to the edge of the tarmac, so the whole world narrows down to 2 cones of headlight and whatever's in them. The first thing was the suspension. I'd stopped at the petrol station at the mouth of the road, last one before the trees, and when I pulled back out, the car sat wrong, lower at the back. You feel it before you understand it, a softness and how it took the bump out of the forecourt. I thought, flat tire, and I actually pulled over 30 seconds later and got out and walked around it in the dark with my phone torch, and the tires were fine. All 4. I stood there a second, feeling stupid, and I remember the trees were completely silent. No wind, no insects. That particular forest silence that feels less like quiet and more like something holding still. I got back in. The car still sat low at the back. I told myself it was the cold. Cold does things to suspension. I don't know if that's even true. I just needed it to be something. I'd been driving maybe 10 minutes when I heard it the first time. It wasn't a scratch. I want to say that because everyone expects a scratch. Everyone's heard that story. It wasn't claws and it wasn't tapping. It was weight. The sound of something heavy on the roof shifting its weight from one side to the other. The way a person settles in a chair. A long, low creak of the metal taking a load and then easing. And then the soft sound of something redistributing itself, getting comfortable. Directly above me. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. The thing I worked out later when I could think straight. When you brake, something on your roof slides forward. When you turn, it slides the other way from the turn. That's just how it works. Things on top of cars obey the car. I know this because as a kid we strapped a kayak up there every summer, and I spent whole drives listening to it fight the corners. This didn't fight the corners. I took the first big bend, the long left-hander by the quarry, and I braced for the weight to shift right, and it didn't move at all. It stayed dead center. It stayed over me. The car leaned into the turn the wrong way, pulled toward the inside like the load was anchored to the middle of the roof, and I gripped the wheel and I said out loud, to nobody, "Okay," like I was agreeing to something. I don't know why I said okay. I've thought about that a lot. And then I remembered the hand. It came up out of nowhere, the way grief does. You don't summon it, it summons you. When I was small, I got carsick, bad, every long drive. And I'd go quiet and gray in the front, and Daniel would be in the back, 8 years older, too cool to be looking after his baby brother. And he'd reach forward without a word and put his hand flat on the back of my seat, right behind my head. He never said anything. He never made it a thing I'd have to thank him for. Just his hand, flat against the seat back, and somehow that was the whole message. I've got you. You're all right. I'd forgotten it for 30 years. It surfaced right there on the quarry bend with my dead brother 3 hours in the ground. And the weight moved. Not with the car, with the memory. The second that hand came into my head, the thing on the roof slid forward, slow and deliberate, from the back where it had been sitting low all this time, up toward the front, toward me. I felt the nose of the car dip as the load came over the windscreen line. I heard the metal of the roof take the weight directly above my head, and the suspension at the front went soft, the way it had gone soft at the back at the petrol station. It had moved up the car to be over me. The exact moment I remembered him reaching for me. I told myself, branch. A branch fell and is rolling forward as I accelerate. I even slowed down to test it, because if it was rolling, slowing down would send it sliding back. I came off the accelerator and let the car coast down to almost nothing. It didn't slide back. It pressed down harder. I could hear the roof. A long, low, bending sound. The sound sheet metal makes when you lean your whole weight on it. And it was coming from the panel directly above my head. And I looked up. You can't help it. You look up. And in the dome light, I watched the headliner, the fabric ceiling of my own car, push down maybe an inch, like something resting its weight on it from above, right over me. I want to be honest about what I did, because in the stories, the person always does something brave or something clever, and I did neither. I drove. I just kept driving, because the forest road has no turnoffs, and stopping in the pitch dark with that above me felt worse than moving, and because some animal part of me had decided that if I just got home, if I just reached the lights of the town, it would be over. So I drove, and I tried very hard not to think, because every time I thought of him, it got heavier. But you can't not think. That's the cruelty of it. Tell yourself, don't think of the man you're driving home from burying, and he's all there is. I thought about the last voicemail he left me, that I never returned. 8 months ago, he just said, "It's me. Give us a ring when you can. No rush." No rush. And I had all the no rush in the world, and I used it to do nothing. The weight slid an inch lower. I thought about how he came to my wedding alone, and sat at the back and left before the dancing. And I never asked him why. I was annoyed. I thought it was rude. I didn't think for 1 second that maybe he was struggling and didn't want to bring it into my day. The roof bowed lower. Every unfinished thing between us, every call I let ring out, every time I thought, I'll sort it out with Daniel eventually, each one landed on the roof like a stone, and the ceiling came down toward my head an inch at a time, and I understood, in a way I couldn't have explained then, and can barely explain now, that the weight wasn't crushing me. It wasn't trying to get in. It was reaching. It was trying to get to the back of my seat. It was trying to put its hand flat behind my head, and there was a roof in the way, and it was pressing down through the only barrier it had left, trying and trying to reach a place it used to reach so easily without a word. That's when the road went wrong. I passed the dead deer at the edge of the tarmac. There's always roadkill on that stretch. I barely registered it. And then, maybe 4 minutes later, I passed the same deer again. Same deer. Same angle, the same white of its belly turned to the road, the same patch of broken bracken behind it. I know my own road. There is no loop. It's a straight run with bends, but it does not come back on itself, and I passed that deer twice. And I looked at the dashboard clock and it said 11:48, and I drove for what felt like 10 more minutes and looked again, and it still said 11:48. And the odometer was climbing. The miles were ticking up. The engine was working, but the clock had stopped and the road had started repeating, and the trees had come in closer to the tarmac than trees can grow, leaning.
the way people lean in around a hospital bed, and the weight came all the way down. The headliner touched the top of my head, gently.
Not crushing, not violent. Just the soft pressure of something resting there, the exact weight of a hand, settling over the crown of my skull, through a roof that should not bend. And the whole car had gone low on its springs like it was carrying 10 passengers. And I was alone. I was so completely alone in that car, with the one thing in the world I had spent 10 years being too busy to reach for. And it was finally touching me, the only way it could. And I was driving away from it at 60 miles an hour, with my hands locked on the wheel. I stopped the car. You're not supposed to stop the car. That's the rule. Everyone knows the rule. You don't stop and you don't get out. The whole story always hinges on don't get out of the car. And I want to tell you I thought about it, weighed it, made a decision. I didn't. I just couldn't drive away from him anymore. I'd done it for 10 years, and I'd done it for the last 40 minutes, and I couldn't do it for one more second. I stopped in the middle of the forest road with the engine running and the clock frozen at 11:48. And I got out, and I stood in the dark with the trees leaning over me, and I made myself look at the roof of my car. There was nothing there. Of course there was nothing there. The roof was clean and flat and dry, and there was nothing on it, and there never had been. Except the suspension was still compressed. The car was still sitting low on all four corners like it was carrying a weight I could now no longer see. And the silence of that forest was the fullest silence I have ever stood inside. The kind that's holding something. The kind that's holding still. And I did the thing I should have done 8 months ago when he left that voicemail, or 10 years ago, or at any point in a life I assumed would keep offering me chances. I put my hand flat on the roof of the car, right above where my seat was. The way he used to. I pressed my palm flat against the cold metal, and I said his name, and I said I was sorry. And I said the thing you only ever get to say to the air, which is that I'd had him my whole life, and I'd treated him like he'd always be there. And I don't know what I felt. I felt the metal warm under my hand slightly, the way a seat warms when someone's been sitting in it. And the car came up off its springs, slowly. The suspension rose corner by corner, the weight leaving, the chassis lifting back to where a car sits when it's carrying nothing and no one. And I stood there, with my hand on the roof of an empty car on an empty road, feeling the last of my brother's weight leave the world. The clock started again when I got back in. 11:49. The deer didn't come back. I drove the last 20 minutes and the trees stood where trees stand, and the town lights came up over the hill exactly where they were supposed to. And I went home, and I went to bed. And in the morning it was a normal day, the first of the rest of the normal days. People want me to say it was grief, a trick of an exhausted mind, a man who hadn't slept, who hadn't eaten, driving a familiar road in the dark after the worst day of his life. And maybe, I'm not going to stand here and tell you a ghost rode my roof for 40 minutes. I don't know what I believe. I've gotten good at not finishing that thought. But here's the part I've never told anyone. The part that means I still don't drive that road at night. The part that's underneath all of it. When Daniel reached forward and put his hand on the back of my seat, when we were kids, he only ever did it when I was about to be sick. When I'd gone quiet and gray and scared and couldn't say it. He could always tell before I could. He'd know I was in trouble before I knew, and he'd reach forward without a word. I've got you, before I'd even understood I needed it. So I lie awake some nights and I think about that weight coming up the roof of the car toward me, reaching, and I think, he wasn't saying goodbye. That's not what the hand ever meant. The hand never meant goodbye. The hand meant he could tell I was in trouble before I could. And I've spent every night since wondering what it is he saw coming for me, down that road, in the dark, that made him reach all the way back across whatever he's crossed, just to put his hand behind my head one more time. I'm not sick. I feel fine. I keep telling myself I feel fine. But Daniel could always tell before I